Welcome to another exciting edition of Plank of the Week. Here we are at the world headquarters of Plankery, which is of course in the News Building here in London, right near London Bridge. I am joined today by two stalwarts of Plankery, a man who's done this many times, Russell Quirk. We call you, I guess, property consultant these days, don't we? And a PR guru to the stars and all sorts of things like that. And Esther Krakue's back as well, who I've just been told had the highest level ratings of all time the last time you were here. So we're hoping for another popular one. Of course, what you need to do is sign up to our YouTube channel where we do all sorts of other great stuff as well. The ever-growing Talk Radio TV, and we're going to be doing much more of that. There's been an awful lot of plankery this week, hasn't there? I mean, from
as usual,
for choice,
from the Lib Dems to the Labour Party to the Royal Family to I don't know where to begin really. Why don't you kick us off, Russell?
I'll kick off with the first one. Okay, well, I say this with regret, Mike, can I say, because I know he's almost become a bit of a, I don't know, it's an overused phrase, but a national treasure.
Yeah.
Rishi Sunak.
Yes.
The Conservative Chancellor, or some might ask themselves currently, is he?
Controversial that, because he's everybody's favourite Tory.
Well, he's certainly one of the most favoured politicians, I think, of recent times, and understandably so. He's dished out lots and lots of money to businesses and employees and so on and so forth, insofar as the whole COVID epidemic and the crisis that's surrounded that. But what you may have seen over the weekend is, of course, the rumours from inside Whitehall that he's about to go on a tax attack, and particularly insofar as attacking the wealthy. So the plan is, as it's been leaked, that he intends to increase corporation tax from 19% to 24%. Which
is an outrageous hike of actually more than 25%,
well, it's huge. And he's going to tax pensions, get rid of the triple lock, and tax the wealthy, all to pay for the consequence of COVID. Now, I think most of us kind of get that, but it was John Redwood, I think, that said yesterday that, look, you cannot tax yourselves out of, you can't tax yourselves out of a crisis like this, and you certainly can't tax insofar as growth. You spend and invest for growth, but you certainly can't tax because, of course, all that happens then is things contract even further.
Do you know what I find interesting about John Redwood, right, was that we used to regard this guy as a bit weird, kind of the Vulcan, right? That was his nickname. And he never laughs, he very rarely smiles. He actually now sounds quite sensible.
Yes.
I don't know what that tells you about the rest of the government, because they seem to be off the wall scary. And Redwood's sitting there like some kind of, sort of old-fashioned guru. Yeah,
so look, I know there's 4 years until an election, so you could argue that a Conservative government with a majority of 80 can do what they like. But I would wager that Middle England and business, if they are taxed until the pipsqueak, to use an old saying, as a consequence of, admittedly having to pay for all this, I don't think Middle England standard Conservative voters are really going to let Rishi off the hook in the future, or indeed this government. So I think it's a really terrible thing to do. If anything, I believe taxes should be reduced so that we can prosper.
People can spend more money.
Yeah.
Because the end result of putting up taxes is that people will spend less, they'll have less to spend, and they will be parsimonious, and also they will hate it. They will hate the government. And the number of people who'll be happy about it, it's so minuscule, none of whom would vote Tory anyway. There's no point in doing it.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It seems like they're kicking themselves.
Go through the roof,
it seems like they're kicking themselves in the foot, doesn't it?
Yeah, 5% hike in corporation tax. That's obscene.
Well, and of course it's business. The majority of people are employed by small businesses. It's something like 90% of people are employed by small businesses. So to say to those businesses that basically, you've got to work hard, and obviously you've been under the cosh, as we all have over recent weeks and months, but as a consequence those hard-earned profits are going to be taxed even more, I think is an absolute outrage.
Well, it is. And also they've already started squeezing everybody in small business as well by the way that they've had put a tax on dividends now, which never used to exist. It used to be a lot easier to make money that way. So they're kind of trying to close off any kind of entrepreneurship in the country. And what they should be doing is going after the big companies, which I would be quite happy to see them do, like Google, like Starbucks, these people, these big American corporations that pay bugger all.
That are still let off the hook consistently.
Yeah.
So I never thought I'd say it, Mike, I have to say, but
well, it's interesting. Also, I think Rishi Sunak will become less popular as soon as the furlough money starts disappearing.
And
everyone goes,
oh,
that swine Rishi Sunak used to give me all this money. I mean, I was hearing the other day from someone that this Eat Out to Help Out scheme has actually resulted in a very weird phenomenon where people are now expecting to be given something back. I was talking to a friend of mine who runs a restaurant, and he said he overheard people saying, and these are mostly young people, well, we're not going to come back until they bring that back, because even now they've taken it away, they'll have to put it back on, because we'll all stop coming until they put it back on.
It was young people.
I know. So people are now expecting a handout from the government. So if you can't get any jobs, don't worry, the government will look after you. If you want some money to go out and eat, here's some more money. I mean, it's
or
worked out badly.
restaurateurs to foot the bill, and of course it's a big chunk. It's 50%.
Yeah.
It's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so you could argue it's a time when those restaurants perhaps are not as busy as they normally would be. But yeah, no, look, I think you're exactly right. We're getting to a situation where it's kind of here's a load of money, and everybody wants more and more and more.
I mean, we need to get people standing on their own 2 feet, don't we?
Yeah, responsibility.
Oh my gosh, what?
Yes, I know.
Make people responsible for themselves. How dare
people
you,
actually
Mike?
taking responsibility for what they say, what they do, where they go.
Ooh,
you know,
the
I mean,
anarchy.
I know it's a bit radical, but you know, this is a Tory government we're talking about. They're supposed to believe in self-reliance.
You could have fooled me.
I know. Who's your first one?
Okay, so my first one is
kind.
Dawn Butler.
Dawn Butler.
Your friend.
Oh, my best friend. If anyone's been following me on Twitter, you realize that I have campaigned to have this woman. Like, okay, so basically, 23 days ago, and I have a countdown on my Twitter for anyone who's curious. Dawn Butler was being driven by a, I'm going to say racially ambiguous man, because from the video footage, she had to confirm and have a signed letter from Dick Cressida that this man was actually black. Everyone saw a very pale man, so let's say he was racially ambiguous. They were stopped because they drove past police and the back windows of the car were tinted, so they couldn't actually, and the police chief confirmed that they couldn't see who was in the car. So the policeman got suspicious, and so they put in the license plate, but apparently they put in the wrong license plate.
Put it in wrong, didn't they?
Yeah, so it came up with a car in Yorkshire, which was suspicious. So they decided to pull it over just as professional
curiosity. And this is because, I think for background, there had been people coming in cars from Yorkshire committing crimes in the area.
Exactly.
Something like that.
In Hackney.
Yeah,
exactly. I must point out that this is Hackney, so I feel like if the police actually wanted to stop and search a white person, they might have been there all day. Anyway, so they stopped the car and apologized and said, you know, this was the reason why and all of that. From the video footage that Dawn Butler shared, it didn't actually show in a very good light because the policeman couldn't get in a word in anyways. And she decided
she was kind of wagging her finger at, wasn't she?
Exactly. She looked like the happiest racially profiled woman on planet Earth. So she decided to put the faces of these police officers on social media and conduct a trial by social media. And since then I said, okay, well, this sounds like rubbish, because it probably was. Let's have the body cam footage of the police released, because if you've accused the Metropolitan Police of racially profiling you, even though you weren't the driver, let's have it out. Since then, she has blocked me. We haven't heard any.
How very democratic of her.
I know, yeah, a member of parliament.
They love that. They love doing that, Labour MPs. I've been blocked by loads of them. Not her, mind you.
Really? You haven't blocked my Dawn?
Not yet. Well, I haven't really gone at her. I haven't really gone after her, but but yeah. So what's happened with this footage? Is it not being released because she won't allow it?
They have 20 working days to get back to me, and a whole bunch of other people that submitted the request. I don't know whether you have to, it can only be released to the people that are in it, but if that's the case, then it's even more suspicious, because why wouldn't she want it released if she's so boldly
if it proves
accusing?
her point.
Exactly, and the mainstream media jumped all over.
She's had to be asked permission for it to be released, and she said no, potentially.
Probably, but either way, this just makes her, just shows the lunacy of the whole everything is racist kind of era that we're living in. So she's probably going to be a plank until that footage is released. And if it's not released, then it's just, I feel like that's a perfect example of how the mainstream media jumps on anything to do with race, because they feel like it kind of, I don't know, it says, yeah, we were right or whatever.
She did seem to be reveling in it, didn't she?
Oh, she was enjoying it.
I mean,
well, she did that whole thing, didn't she? Where her first tweet was, "I've just been stopped by the police while driving through Hackney. I'll be putting out a video later with all the details," right? Making it sound as though something terrible happened. And it actually meant that people like David Lammy, another plank, who doesn't appear often in the planks list, sent his... What was it? He was sending love and prayers to her. Do you remember? And Owen Jones was like, "Oh, I hope you're okay."
Yeah, wheel out the victim support.
She's fine. She's absolutely fine.
She wasn't even driving the car.
One, she wasn't driving the car.
She wasn't stopped
or
searched.
They couldn't see who she was in order to stop her, i.e. they didn't know that she was black. And three, you know, by the time she actually released the video, it was very clear that she doctored it and it was only releasing a bit of it. And then it didn't show anything anyway.
The police officers, I think, apologised, didn't they? Instead, they explained that they put in the wrong registration number in error, apologised, kind of job done, but she was, she didn't
And the police themselves, who normally fall over themselves to apologise, actually said they didn't do anything wrong.
And the police chief has actually wanted the footage to be released. But my point for going after Dawn on this is because I'm so sick of people just constantly bashing our public services, our police, our healthcare, our everything. It is so vile because they actually do a lot of good work. And I wanted to draw the point to this because there are a lot of police officers who've actually messaged me and said there are actually crimes that go on that affect black people by other black people that you don't really hear about, because everything is racist and nobody wants to talk about the issues that are predominantly
somebody who's in an
black
important
people.
position, as she is, as a lawmaker, is effectively, you know, saying, pay no attention to the police, pay no attention to the law. The message basically to anyone is, if the police pull you over, just don't bother. And it's probably racist. And that's really a bad signal to anyone.
Do you remember when I got on with Femi? I think it was on...
I heard that the other night,
Yeah, he was like, the police better be... So I was like, at what point does it not become racist?
At what point does Femi not get invited onto radio shows, by the way? He doesn't get onto mine. He's boring as hell. And he just bangs on. He's got the same argument about everything.
No, but he said, because I asked him, I said, at what point does a police stopping or arresting or whatever a non-white person not become racist?
Yeah.
And he said, oh, the police better be damn sure because of the statistics. And I was like, so you want the police to take extra care when they're stopping a black person because you somehow have this assumption that black people just go around shaking in their boots, just waiting to be stopped by the police. I mean, it's ridiculous.
But again, that's the narrative that some people like him have been portraying, as if, you know, you don't know what it's like to be black because you're not black, therefore you don't know what it's like to be stopped
and
every time
persecuted
you go
every
minute.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, you know,
the horror.
I can ask you this question. Do you get stopped everywhere you go by the police?
Not by the police.
No, but by other people. I can imagine. Did you like that little grin? The little grin at the end. Yeah.
Not by the,
now listen, I'm going to go Lib Dems all the way for my first plank of the week because it's taken, I think, about 6 months for them to decide who should be the new leader of the Lib Dems, right?
Not that anyone's really noticed.
And guess what? It's the same one they had before they had the election for the new leader, Sir Edward Davey, who's such a plank. The last time he appeared was for putting out a video that he was celebrating Ramadan, right? Yeah. To which everybody went, why are you fasting for Ramadan? You're not a Muslim. But he was obviously doing it because he thought it was the right thing to do, a bit of virtue signaling.
There was another one, him dancing at a carnival in the street, I think, as well, wasn't
probably,
there? Which was toe-curlingly embarrassing.
Well, he is toe-curlingly embarrassing. The most embarrassing thing, though, about this poll that they did, this ballot that they held, apart from the fact that it went on for months and the fact that they had all sorts of debates between him and Layla Moran, you know, who's the only pansexual in Parliament as far as I know.
What?
She's a pansexual, which means that she has sex basically without any kind of attraction to one sex or another, or indeed one gender or another.
So she's kind of asexual.
So you can have
basically...
But
is it exclusively with humans? Because when I hear pansexual,
I think it's mostly humans. Yeah,
you have to ask
probably. I think it is probably entirely humans. Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, but basically, so you can have sex with somebody who's transgender, who's lesbian, who's homosexual in some other way, or who is, heterosexual, men, women. I don't know. I mean,
because it's just man and woman. That's why I asked, is it exclusively humans?
Well, I think it is exclusively humans, but as you know, there can be many different, there's about 51 different genders now, isn't there? So
there's thousands, apparently.
There's thousands, yeah. So that's what it's all about.
Okay.
So they have this thing, and they have a membership of something like, I don't know how many they have, but say 100,000. They only got a turnout of 53%, I think it was.
In their own leadership election.
Or 57%, sorry. Yeah. So 43% of Lib Dems who are actually so interested in Lib Dems that they've joined the party couldn't be bothered voting.
But is it any wonder when a week ago Layla Moran advocated votes for 11-year-old children?
Right.
Yeah,
so even her own party, to your point, 43% have probably looked at that and thought, look, we're a wacky party, but this is getting ridiculous even for us.
Yeah. Even for us, this is getting mad, yeah. I mean, I just can't imagine what they're for. And also now, Ed Davey says he's now going to spend the rest of the year going around the country talking to people, which I presume will be really, really fascinating, right? Because he's now worked out that actually trying to remain in the European Union after we'd voted to leave it is really not a very good policy.
Yeah.
So he's going to put that to one side now, and he's going to put it behind the Lib Dems, and so they're no longer going to campaign to get back into Europe. They're going to campaign for something else. But they don't know what it is yet. Yeah. So they're going to ask people. So I thought the point of having a political party was to basically appeal to people with the policies that you have. He now has no policies because he has to ask other people what they should be.
Yeah, so he doesn't believe in anything unless he's told what to believe.
Right. Yeah. So if he comes around your way, you can just give a couple of ideas, and they might become Lib Dem party policy.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope he can actually define what a woman is. Because
he won't be able to.
That would be a first for a Lib Dem.
He won't be able to do that.
But do we not think over the last 3 or 4 years of the political turmoil that we've seen, countless general elections, Brexit, COVID and so on, that the Conservatives have been at each other's throats, Labour have disintegrated for a whole bunch of reasons. If ever there was a time for the third party in this country to come up kind of in the rearview mirror and overtake those two and to provide some kind of tangible, meaningful choice, it would be now.
Yeah.
But still, the Lib Dems are sitting there on what, 8,
disarray.
9%, 8, 9% support? I mean, they may as well pack up and go home.
Well, they should.
That was the Lib Dems from a decade ago, like 2010. That was what the Lib Dems officially represented. That's how they got into a coalition.
They've never recovered from coalition and never recovered from the lies on tuition fees.
Yeah,
well, that's obviously what happens, isn't it? Once you actually get into power, you have to then be answerable to the populace.
And acquiesce, which they did.
Well, no, but that was their excuse. I mean, they didn't have to acquiesce. They could have actually stood up for what they believed in and said, no, we're not going along with this putting tuition fees up. We said we wouldn't go with that.
Yeah.
You're going to have to do something else.
Yeah.
But they all just folded like a pack of cards.
But they wanted the trappings.
Yeah,
I mean,
but they wanted the trappings of the ministerial cars and the £140,000 a year ministerial salaries. Of course they did. They wanted the power.
Oh, they absolutely loved it. But also, they then thought that they were in a great position because all these people quit the Labour Party and the Tory Party, went and joined the Lib Dems, right? And they thought, oh, look, we've got 24 MPs now. And then they all lost.
Yeah.
And even Jo Swinson, who was going to be the next Prime Minister, if you remember, she couldn't even win her own seat.
Yeah. Oh, bless her.
Dear God. Right, let's
let's
have your number 2.
Number 2. So mine kind of slightly related, I suppose, to the whole Rishi Sunak thing over the last few days. I want to nominate the entire foreign aid budget, which is about £15 billion.
Yes, it is. It's a lot of money.
It's obviously been in the news over the last few days because Rishi Sunak has suggested, or leaks have suggested, that he's suggesting that he might cut it slightly.
Right.
Of course, there's one
I thought
section...
he was going to take it all back. I thought he was going to stop giving it away.
Potentially all of it. And of course, there's been an outcry from certain political spheres insofar as us not being able to do that. But I think we should bin the whole thing. When you look into it, as I have a little bit, and you see what that £15 billion is actually spent on, we as taxpayers in this country have sent money to places like Vietnam, whereby the money has been spent on shopping malls. Yeah. Shopping malls. We've spent money...
Didn't they also spend it in Vietnam on some kind of literacy programme or something like that?
But get this also, we
Well,
sent
it's
it
a
to...
really good idea to do it here.
We sent it to...
I mean, not Vietnam.
We sent it to India, which is about to put its own people in space. It's got that much money.
Yeah.
We apparently funded a Pakistani shopping website, like an Amazon equivalent.
Okay.
I mean, which is hardly kind of poverty related, is it?
Not really.
Yeah. And a bunch of restaurants apparently in Egypt. So, and private schools in other countries. So
good.
We are proliferating taxpayer money without really having any idea where it's going, without having any control of it whatsoever.
No control.
It's
but what they say about
£15
it, of course, is that it leads to us doing trade deals with these countries because they're so grateful for the money. I think we've given some to China.
Yeah.
You know, China, which is basically the richest country now in the world.
But Mike, if our trade, if our goods and services are good enough, we're going to sell them anyway.
Yeah.
And if theirs are good enough, we're going to buy theirs. So we don't need a fillip, do we? We don't need a kind of, anything to prime that relationship.
No, again, it's a little bit, actually, I mean, and you might be surprised to hear me say this, it's a little bit kind of embarrassing and a little bit like building an empire, isn't it? Where you're going, well, look, you poor people over there, we'll give you some of our money. Do you want to start something up like do you want to do some shopping?
Yeah.
You know, here's some money.
And to put it into
you haven't got any of
context-
your own. I mean, it's a bit kind of condescending.
And
isn't it?
to put it into context, that £15 billion would run the Home Office every year, or the Environment Agency for a year.
Right.
It's big money.
It is big money.
And
And
Has
also,
no one else had this idea? I cannot believe. Like, did no one think about this during the recession?
well, I mean, it's been a bit of a political football over the years because there's been lots of people, particularly on the right, who have said, this is not what we want to be spending our money on.
Yeah.
And if you ask the British people, generally speaking, they'll say, no, we shouldn't be giving this money
Certainly
away.
reduce it from whatever it is, 1% of GDP.
And I mean, aside from anything else, because there is no kind of policing of where it goes and what's done with it, I mean, I remember they sent some to Malawi a few years back, and the leader of Malawi, who wasn't quite as democratic as we apparently thought, spent it all on a fleet of Mercedes.
Well, there was a jet.
You know?
There was a jet as well, wasn't there?
And a jet,
A jet was bought.
Right.
Yeah, presidential
Which
jet.
is essential for poverty purposes.
Well, it is to get away when the famine hits. But I just don't think it's relevant anymore. I think it seems out of touch with reality, and it's out. I mean, they should be giving us money. I mean, we should be getting funding from China, India, and all the countries, and probably Vietnam's doing better than we are.
Yeah,
now,
no, but I think Esther's right. It is kind of imperialistic, isn't it? It's kind of almost harks back to our kind of.
It's a bit insulting
from a Commonwealth perspective, where we're apparently still beholden insofar as funding those countries. But I think it needs to stop, particularly at a time when we need the money.
Does it make sense to give foreign aid to countries that give foreign aid? Does that make sense?
I guess they would argue that they can't
Indian
be foreign aid because
government
they're
does
poor,
give-
but clearly they're not, because they're spending all their money on shopping channels and Vietnamese restaurants and private
But
schools.
the Indian government does give up foreign aid, and so does the Chinese government. I mean, it's quite opportunistic.
Well, that's lunacy, though, isn't it? So if
yeah.
we're giving money to China and they're giving it back,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
Not
kind
to
of...
us. No, they give it to other countries. But if you can afford to give money to other countries, surely that should be deducted from your foreign aid budget.
And I think certainly they could say if you've got your own space program, you're basically not getting any of our money.
You probably don't need it.
No, I would say so. Number 2, Esther.
Number 2, the Adele haters.
Ah, yes.
So Adele, who is looking fabulous, by the way. I know the body positivity.
Do you know, she
movement.
looks so amazing. I'm
She
beginning
looks
to
so
wonder,
good.
right, and this is not a joke,
Okay.
whether it's actually not her. That, you
Really?
know, she's hired somebody.
It's just a pseudo Paul McCartney
Yeah,
conspiracy
she's
theory.
hired somebody, right, to
look
pretend
fabulous.
to be her, and she's still sitting at home with the old.
She does
you
look
know,
rather different, I have to
She
say.
looks.
She
She doesn't
looks
look like
so
herself.
good. She looks toned.
She does look
and
amazing. I'm only
looks
joking.
Tight and right, like. Anyway, but she wore a bikini
Yeah.
top with the Jamaican flag and got her hair up in Bantu knots,
Right.
which are traditionally sort of African.
Was she
hairstyle.
actually in Jamaica when she did that?
No, it was for sort of a carnival-esque
Oh, right,
sort
for
of
Notting
thing.
Hill,
though.
yeah,
Yeah, for
right.
the Notting Hill Carnival, because it didn't happen this year.
Right.
And as you probably know, Adele grew up in Tottenham, which
Yeah.
has a large, Caribbean diaspora.
Yeah.
Now, many, I must point out that there were Black Americans on social media decided to, I don't know, lose their mind, say this is cultural appropriation, all the rest of it. And okay, where do I begin?
Well, do you know
It's
what I'm
hard,
going to
isn't
say?
it?
I'm going to
It's
say
hard.
that Black Americans don't get British culture.
British culture,
They
yeah.
don't get it. They don't understand that actually most of us, particularly if you grew up in London or one of the major cities, you have friends who have got all sorts of different
yeah,
backgrounds,
exactly.
right? Because America's not like that. You know, America really isn't. I mean, my kids went to school in America, and I can tell you that they have got huge schools which have got all sorts of people in them, but they don't mix.
Yeah.
You know, they've got the Hispanic group over here, the black kids are over there, the white kids are over there. It's a very different
It's a
world,
different
and they
world.
don't live in the same neighbourhood. You know, every neighbourhood is different.
But Adele has kind of demonstrated the kind of epitomal multiculturalism, surely.
Yeah, but she
She's
grew up
getting
in
involved
London.
in other
Yeah, yeah.
culture.
I mean, when
And then
I
gets
moved
targeted
here,
as if she's doing it by, in some way, to stick her fingers
yeah,
up at
as
that
like
culture.
a fetish or sort of thing. I mean, I like when I moved here, my friends were Moroccan, Kenyan, from Hong Kong, because London is a melting pot, and
Yeah.
the UK in general
course it
is a
is.
melting pot.
Yeah.
But there's a real mix of cultures, and I think one thing a lot of these Black Americans don't realize is it's kind of become like this hegemony of Black culture, which is just weird because Black culture is not one thing. It's so
No,
diverse, and
of
it's
course
so
it is.
and it's ironic because a lot of the thing it's like almost saying you don't know your history, but a lot of African Americans are actually, if they were in South Africa, they'd be called colored.
Yeah.
Because they've mixed so much over the generations that they're actually have a lot of ancestry from different sort of
Right.
ethnicities and all of that. So it's so ironic that they're telling someone like Adele, who probably has more relevance to sort of Jamaican culture than they do,
Right.
that she can't wear this hairstyle or she can't wear
Right.
this flag. And I'm like, can you point to Jamaica on a map?
Right. No, they obviously, absolutely
Do
not.
we think this is part of the problem? This whole you have to look backwards all the time.
Exactly, and you
rather
have
than
to
looking
look how you
forward
look.
insofar as, embracing multiculturalism going forward. Now, I'm not saying that history isn't important. Of course it is. But if we only think about what happened in the past and keep kind of making excuses, stroke being asked to apologise for it time and time again, we're never going to move forward, are
Yeah.
we?
But also,
Exactly.
does that also mean that nobody apart from Scottish people can wear tartan?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
pretty bad news for an awful lot of people who quite like wearing tartan. I mean, I'm not one of them, but I actually have got my own tartan. There is a Graham tartan.
Really?
And when I did my
You're
confirmation,
going to be asked to demonstrate
Yeah,
this.
you
at some
have
point.
well, I did wear a kilt when I was for my confirmation, but I was only about 9 years old. I've never.
Was it
But I mean, if
voluntarily?
you go and live in Scotland, you go to a lot of black tie do's, and a lot of the guys are wearing kilts.
Yeah.
Rather than actually, I mean, they've got this sort of. There's a sort of dress version of a kilted outfit. And you wear
Sporran and the big socks.
The sporran and the little dagger
look
and all
forward
that.
to seeing that
And
one.
women love it. I mean, they do.
And don't
But,
ask what's underneath the kilt.
I was not going to.
well, it's the old joke, isn't it? Is there anything worn underneath the kilt? And you say, no, it's all in very good working order. Thank you very much indeed.
I'm
But
sure
anyway,
there's a nice breeze.
yeah, exactly right. But I don't think I would wear a kilt now. But, there are scarves that people wear, tartan scarves. Rod Stewart, who would claim to be Scottish because his dad was Scottish, made a living out of wearing tartan. But you're basically saying, you're culturally misappropriating
Yeah.
Scotland, which is ridiculous.
But it goes back to this whole everything is racist.
Yeah.
Everything is cultural
Do
appropriation.
you think it's worse now, though? It
I
must
think
be.
it's so much worse.
It's much
And,
worse since the Black
it's
Lives
just-
Matter thing, isn't it?
Oh God, I call Black Lives Matter in the UK especially a plague.
Yeah.
And I get in trouble for it. But it is. It's honestly a plague because I don't see how it's made any sort of progress, especially in the UK.
No.
And I remember when I asked, are you protesting for the 13 black people that have been killed in the UK while in police custody over a decade?
Right.
Like what exactly?
Right.
I mean, there were people that were shouting, don't shoot at the police.
Yeah.
And they're carrying batons.
Right.
So it's just, I think this is something that needs to be pointed out, because there's always, like, there's kind of this almost sort of weird black nationalism that are led by a bunch of weirdos on Twitter that get offended by everything on behalf of black people. And then they just descend upon my DMs and just hurl all sorts of racist abuse at me. And I was like, you don't know anything about Notting Hill Carnival. You don't know anything about Tottenham. You don't know anything about Adele or how multicultural the UK is. Have several seats.
Exactly right. Well, I'm going to carry on from that, because I'm going to nominate a woman I hadn't heard of until this week, called Liz Jolly, who's the chief librarian at the British Library. Now, you might think the British Library was a place where they would have books, for example, or possibly, you know, pieces of interesting historical documents, that kind of thing, right? She's apparently decided, and I don't know why she's done it, but they basically launched an anti-racism project at the British Library. So they're going to sweep through the building. It's almost like they've got some kind of detector, you know.
Is this book burning?
Well, it's almost like that. It's basically getting rid of anything
and that's
which might be in some way offensive to people who are saying that it might be racist, right? They're basically saying they are absolutely committed to getting rid of everything that talks about white racism, because basically racism was invented by white people. That's what she said.
And who's the judge? I mean, who's going to interpret whether it's white racism, or where's the line? And
well, I mean, that's a very good question. Nobody really seems to know the answer to that. Liz Jolly, all she knows is that she needs to radically change the way that the British Library looks. I mean, we talked last week about the guy who invented, or who started the British Museum. The bloke who's now in charge of the British Museum is removing his statue from the British Museum, even though he started it. And he actually invented the British Museum, and he brought like 1,700 artifacts to the British Museum because he had some kind of connection to the slave trade, because he lived in that time when that was what went on.
But Miss Jolly wants to therefore airbrush history.
She basically wants to airbrush history. So if you want to go to the British Library, I mean, she might find, for example, the Magna Carta to be offensive, in which case she gets rid of it. And it's, I mean, the thing that gets me about this is that the British Library does not belong to Liz Jolly. The British Museum does not belong to the bloke who's currently running, who, by the way, is from Dresden, believe it or not, from Germany. You know, these are British institutions which are effectively owned by the British people. And it's not for them. It's like a football club, you know.
But we have to question that.
She's in charge of it for a while.
You've got to question that authority.
Change it.
She doesn't have the authority to do it.
No, I know.
I just have one question. How does any of these... So it's kind of like the tearing down statues in Bristol, which is a city I lived in for 4 years, which I was horrified by. It's all this, you know, the thing that happened in Oxford, or now with the British Library. How has that in any way tangibly helped me as a black person?
Right. Well,
and they can never answer that question. It's not helped a single... I mean, I know people that just want to just go about their business, just do their lives. I don't even want to, like...
Well, can I ask you, were you previously offended by those statues?
I didn't even care. I lived right next to the
William Colston statue was there, did you?
I lived there for 4 years. I didn't care. It didn't even make a difference. I mean, I knew there were people that were trying to change the name of like the Wills Memorial to something that was less offensive. But I'm like, if you're offended by a statue or the name of something, see a shrink. See a therapist.
Also, I think the Cecil Rhodes statue in Oxford's still there, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know.
Because I don't think they've been able to pull it down. I mean, they've talked about it.
I don't think it's
well, it's too high up, I think, because it's actually above everybody's head.
It is. It's up
so
there,
it's
above
not,
the window.
you know, they can't get up there to pull it down. But similarly, they pulled one down in Tower Hamlets, one of the, I think it was East India Dock, and it was a guy who I'd never heard of. He was called Milligan or something like that. And he was the guy that actually was a trader in those days, and some of the trade that he did involved slave trade, but it was also lots of other stuff. But he basically built the docks of London. And by pulling him down, you know, you do a disservice to history, because you don't know who invented the docks effectively.
Who does the research? Like, who decides this week we're going to tear down that statue?
I suggested at the time, Tower Hamlets Council, who have been more or less in charge of Tower Hamlets for most of the year since 1965, didn't find the statue at all offensive until this year.
It's almost the Dawn Butler syndrome from what you were talking about earlier on, which is there will be lots of people trying to find an iota of something that could possibly be perceived as racism within a statue, a book or whatever, so that they can stick it on social media and slag it off.
Even when they're disproved, they don't even care. They're just going to keep running with it. Because
but that's my worry, is that in years to come, you know, my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren will go to the British Library, and all of the things that used to be there won't be there anymore. And they won't be able to use the facilities because it won't be a true reflection of what we are.
Well, and then ironically, you don't learn from history. I mean, there's a reason that Auschwitz is still there. Right?
Yeah.
So that you can go to it and see the horror
Yes.
of what that was all about.
Right.
If we got rid of it because we decided that it was, of course, it's offensive, that's the point. The whole point is that it's offensive and we learn from it. So, yeah, look, this is, look, it's wokeism.
It is.
Max, isn't
But
it?
it just, I mean, every week now there seems to be yet another example of it, and it gets more and more
And I think
ridiculous.
the concern is that a lot of politicians kind of do acquiesce to this kind of movement, don't they?
Yeah.
They do.
Insofar as allowing people to kind of have their way for the sake of a quiet
And I
life.
think it's an important thing
pathetic.
to stand up for as well, though, to push for this idea that actually you're not in charge of this thing. You're managing it for a short period of time until you get your next job. You know, paid probably heaps of money by some other public organisation.
Or even worse, the likes of Sadiq Khan, that
Yeah.
after 4 years in office, suddenly decides that he's offended by the same statues
Yeah.
that some people are offended
I mean, it's
by.
like somebody
and calls
being-
them to come down. Why
Yeah.
didn't he do it last year, the year before, and the
Exactly,
year before?
because he wasn't a problem then. It's like somebody being given the job of, say, manager of the Albert Hall, and the first thing you do is you have it demolished, and you start putting up a block of flats, and you go, well, hang on a minute, it's not yours to do that to. You know, you're not
custodians.
in charge.
You're
That's my
custodians.
thing. No one has a backbone these days. Everyone is just folding over and just saying, "Oh yeah, you're right." Like
You're absolutely right,
Cressida
yeah.
Dick, you know, a police chief that doesn't inspire confidence in
No.
the public. Then Sadiq Khan, who made me pay 15 quid to drive into London on a Sunday, which I'm very salty about still.
That is really not good.
Not good at all. I mean, you know, to our politicians, to people, like, it's just nobody has a backbone anymore. No one is, and it's like you are allowed to question. Just because someone says something is racist doesn't mean it's racist. You're allowed to question things, even if you are like white.
But it's now a brilliant, inverted commas, way of shutting people down, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, it is, totally. What's your number 3?
My number 3, talking of wokeism and woke people, is Banksy.
Oh, yes.
Banksy has not hired but purchased a ship, a
Right.
boat, as you've probably seen,
Okay.
and it's now trawling around the Mediterranean, picking up migrants in dinghies.
No.
And so I think just for that alone, insofar as I think it's called the Louis or the Louise Michel, which
I think
is
that's
the
right,
name
yeah.
of the boat. So if that wasn't reason enough, I think, for Banksy to be on the plank list this week, there's another reason which I think definitely nails it insofar as he's the justification in him being nominated. And that is that currently the thing is sitting there in the Mediterranean and it can't move because he's put so many migrants onto the boat that it is now overloaded and cannot go anywhere.
Right. And also, did not... also, the Italian,
What a
both the Italians and the Maltese both refused the boat entry into their harbours on the grounds that it was too unsafe. Right? So they're just marooned on it now. You know, and somebody actually died. I mean, tragically. Terrible.
I hope the loos are working.
Well, I mean,
I'm sure that's the least of their worries.
I really don't think they are. But I mean, it's also what's he thinking?
But it's kind of the equivalent of the Emma Thompson, Hugh Grant thing.
Yes.
You know, I'll do something that looks really good
Yeah.
and shows me to be kind of down with the kids and woke and right on without thinking it through at all.
Yeah. Right.
It serves him bloody right.
Yeah. And also, all of these do-gooders in terms of the migrant crisis don't seem to understand that every time they help somebody to get somewhere,
It's a signal.
they're actually putting money into the pockets of organised crime.
Yes.
Yeah.
These are the people who are ruining the world by exploiting human beings and making them pay to be transported, sometimes at the risk of their own lives, right? And you're never going to stop that until you stop helping them. And that's the problem. I mean, that's unfortunately, it's the truism that nobody can
I'm
say.
not sure Banksy seems to have a solution for what happens if he can actually get that boat to dock at some point in the future.
Where would it even dock?
What happens?
It wouldn't be
but
allowed
what
to
happens to the
dock in the
migrants?
UK.
They
Yeah.
just get off and he lets them wander off into the streets? I don't know.
Banksy's not going to put them up, is he, in his house? Because nobody knows who Banksy is.
No.
Banksy may not even
Well,
exist.
and that suits him really well at the moment, I
I
suspect.
mean, I'm afraid, you know, it's all very well having a little joke and going, I'm going to paint some pictures on some walls and it's going to be very mysterious, you know. But he's now made loads and loads of money and he refuses to reveal who he is.
Yeah.
It's a bit childish,
Let's
isn't
say
it?
he doesn't have to take any migrants into his house.
Maybe he doesn't pay any tax either. How does that work? I mean, I'd rather he pays some tax on the money he makes rather than actually, you know, pretending that he doesn't exist. But that's another story.
Yeah.
Who's your final one?
Okay. I probably have to give a couple of special mentions because this is a tough one. So I had like Bella Thorne, obviously, for crashing OnlyFans and ticking off all the, I'm not allowed to say prostitutes anymore, so sex workers.
Okay.
And special shout out to Prince Andrew because he'll always have a special place in the plank list.
He will.
This one is for Meghan Markle, and it's just for the fact that
She always has a special place.
yeah,
in
she always
place.
has a special place. I mean,
Are you going to do the impression?
I had to do it last week, so I'm not going to do it this week.
oh, I love
She
it.
was in it last week.
Okay, so the reason why is, and this transcends politics because I don't care about her politics, like I don't care about most people's politics, and I think it's great that she's, you know, happy where she is.
You think she's happy? I don't.
I'd like to
she
think
doesn't
she's
look like
happy.
a woman who's ever happy.
I mean, it's questionable for Harry,
Yeah,
but she has a husband, she has a kid, she's apparently living la vida
She's
loca.
got 16 bathrooms,
exactly,
9 bedrooms.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
Living in a gangster's house.
Yeah.
She is. She bought it from a Russian gangster.
That's right. Yeah.
Allegedly.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure the Russian
Didn't
art
he
is fantastic.
bury his wife in the garden? I mean, I think there's something bad going on
Yeah,
there.
I don't even want to go there because that's
Maybe they've got a discount. Yeah. Just don't do any digging over there.
Yeah, don't do any landscaping.
Yeah. The roses are lovely though.
Yeah.
You know.
But well fertilized. Anyway, okay. So my thing is, she appeared on like something Michelle Obama was doing for like a promotion for the Democrat Party or whatever. You're still carrying the title of Duchess of Sussex, right?
Yes.
And if you claim, which she has in her book, that she was willing to do anything for this family, the royal family that she married into, just out of respect for that institution and for the British people who, you know, welcomed you, even though you weren't particularly happy here, just refrain from speaking so openly and partisanly about politics until you've dropped the title.
Yeah.
I think that's not asking for too much.
It really isn't.
You know, this is someone who left because she wanted privacy or for whatever reason, right? If you're still carrying that title and we're assuming that has conferred some benefits, like your recognition, your name recognition has gone through the roof. Because before then, I didn't know her as anything other than a
And I don't think
supporting
anyone in
character.
America did particularly either.
Exactly. She
You
was,
know.
and she even said she wasn't part of tabloid culture because she wasn't that famous.
Well, she was so not a part of it that she didn't think they had tabloids in America.
Exactly.
It was like, well, now she's finding out that they do,
They do.
actually. And they're
Exactly.
worse than ours.
But it's a royal tradition going back about, what, 1,000 years?
Yeah,
If you're
exactly,
part of
you
the royal
know.
family, you do not comment on politics.
No.
You simply don't do
and
it.
aside of that, you know, Harry should be joined. This should be a joint plank of the week because you should tell your. I mean, I don't know if you can get a word in.
I think Harry can only be plank of the week if she says it's okay for him.
Yeah,
to be
that's
plank
right.
of the
reckon
week.
so, yeah,
I don't think she gives him permission to talk to her unless she wants him
his
to say
sign is
something.
still in
She's
that
got a
brass
bell
jar.
or something.
Yeah.
Ding ding ding. But yeah, you know, tell your wife that this is a 1,000-year tradition. Just have the common decency and respect.
Yeah.
To say, actually, this might not be the. I mean, she's not going to lose anything if she doesn't comment on who she
Well,
wants.
I
us
mean,
to
ever
vote
since
for.
she's been in this new house, I think she's making one video a day, isn't she? And
Yeah,
for a woman who
exactly.
moved away from here to get out of the public spotlight, it seems an unusual way to do so.
Exactly, and
You
it's
know?
just for me. I don't care about the politics of it all because I think American politics is a show on
It's
its
even
own.
more bad than ours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But just have the common decency and the respect for the British public to not, so far as you're carrying that title, to
Yeah.
just not comment. So
And for the monarch and
partisanly.
for the Queen. Have the
Exactly.
respect of the
Also,
Queen.
what's interesting
Exactly.
about old Harry, see, he had a conversation the other day with the rugby league clubs or something, because apparently he's the patron of the Rugby League Association, which I didn't know. And he said to them that he would have planned to come back to Britain sooner were it not for COVID. There are those who say that the main reason he wants to come back to Britain sooner is if he stays too long in America, he has to pay tax there, right? Because they have a residency rule like we do here. If you spend any number of days in the country, you
You're
are considered to
a
be a
resident.
resident, and therefore, which he must be, because he has to get a green card.
And in
to stay there.
California too, those
And
taxes.
he's got a lot of money, and he doesn't want to give any of that up. So
No.
it'll be interesting to see what he does. You may see him floating off towards Hawaii on a boat,
Yeah.
just to get away from California
Yeah.
because he's been there
Find
too
himself
long.
in Samoa.
Yeah.
No, but you know, loads of people are leaving California primarily because of the taxes. If you're sitting on
But
royal
but
family
you know what?
money,
But the irony of him not wanting to pay tax on other people's money.
I know.
Basically,
While he
indirectly,
wants
he's
to
been
lecture
given.
us all on
Yeah.
how we've got to be better.
Yeah.
He's also, I mean, I put him in the planks list a while back when he made that speech about how we all have to be better about race because, you know, it's all time that we learned about race. And to which I said, well, I'm not the one who was done over for using a racial epithet against a friend of his when he was at Sandhurst.
Yeah.
And he called him some kind of racial name.
Didn't he wear a
I'm also
Nazi
not the
uniform
guy.
at some
I'm
point?
also not the guy
Yeah.
that dressed up as a Nazi.
Yeah.
For his fancy dress party. So
Yes.
maybe you, mate,
Yeah.
can start learning about how you should be better. Don't start telling me, because
Yeah.
I haven't done any of that stuff.
We won't take
Yeah.
any lessons from you.
No,
Your
exactly
Royal
right.
Highness. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Speaking of people who need lessons in civility, my final one is Neil Coyle, MP, who's MP for Bermondsey and Southwark. Who happens also to be my own MP, bizarrely. He launched an attack earlier on over the weekend, I think, after he clearly had a few too many sherbets, and started calling everyone who voted for Brexit fat racists,
Yeah.
and started having a go at Jacob Rees-Mogg, who bizarrely isn't fat, and I'm pretty sure he's not a racist either. And he then used a couple of other words which I can't repeat because they'll have to be blanked out. And, you know, I gave him a little bit of jip for this at one point or other. And he then came back with some other nonsense and more abuse, you know, despite the fact that he apologised, didn't he? Because he put out a tweet saying that, you know, on Tuesday I was unwise and I put out a tweet that fell below my normally high standard.
Brackets drunk.
This is a guy, by the way, who has done plenty of this before. I remember I think he called Piers Morgan the C word. And I mean, I don't really care about bad language. I think if you're an MP,
Yeah.
you really ought to behave slightly better than the rest of us. You know, I think you do have a duty of
And
care.
I presume he hasn't ventured onto your show either in person or on the
He has
phone
not.
to justify himself.
No. Well, what I then did was what I always do whenever any MP comes at me. I went and looked up his expenses, and I found I found that the guy who's got a constituency within walking distance of Westminster had claimed 17,000 quid last year up to March. To which I said to him, so I put out a tweet saying, you know, here's a guy whose constituencies were literally within walking distance of Parliament. He somehow managed to claim 17,000 quid in expenses. He then comes back with, this journalist doesn't think I should have a constituency office to see my constituents so he can get lost. But at that point, he didn't know I was one of his constituents. I said, well, unfortunately, that's not really the best way to speak to one of your constituents. Maybe you'd like to invite me into your office so I can see what the 17,000 quid has been paying for. And of course, it's travel expenses. You know, I don't know why.
17 grand.
17 grand. And I mean, I don't know what sort of constituency office he's got, but you'll know better than me the price of commercial property around about Bermondsey is not at the absolute peak of London prices, I presume.
No, it's not Mayfair.
And it looks
Is
like
he going by Concord?
it looks like he pays about 8 grand a year for his office, right?
Does he employ any members of his family?
He probably does. I don't know. But the trouble is, and all these people who then come out in support of him, i.e. those who vote Labour, will say, well, of course he has to have a constituency office. And you know, hang on a minute, how many people does he see? You know, how many people does he employ?
But surely, I mean, you'd be justified in demanding that he stands up to be counted, to be questioned, interviewed, spoken to by you, both as a constituent,
as a journalist. Yeah.
So
but this is the thing: these people think that they, a bit like your conversation about Dawn Butler, they don't get it that we actually pay their wages and we pay their expenses, and they are answerable to the general public.
Yeah.
And in specifics, they're answerable to their own constituents, even if you didn't vote for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm afraid he's on the list.
Yeah. Did you realise that 60% of Labour constituencies voted Brexit?
Well, funnily enough, we had Lee Anderson on, who's a great sort of new Tory MP. Although he's been around a few years, he's been a miner, he's been in trade unions, he actually voted Labour most of his life, but he's now a Tory MP. And he came on the show and he said, well, I'll invite Neil up to Nottingham, where he can meet a few of the former members of the Mine Workers Union, and he can tell them why he thinks they're all fat racists because they voted to leave the European Union.
I suspect he's not going
to. He hasn't taken them up on it, funnily enough. In the same way as he hasn't ever responded to another tweet of mine, so he's probably muted me, I would imagine. But there we are. So there's the 9. So now we've got to get them down to 3. So do you want to pick your favourite one of Russell's? And I'll pick my favourite one of yours, and you can pick your favourite one of mine.
Rishi Sunak, the foreign aid bill, or Banksy.
Oh, Banksy.
Banksy.
It has to be Banksy.
It's got to be Banksy. Okay.
Yeah, it has to be Banksy.
So I've got to choose your 3. So it's Meghan,
Dawn Butler, or Adele Haters.
Actually, I quite like Adele Haters because that's very current, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because Meghan's in there all the time.
Yeah,
and Dawn Butler's kind of been around. So let's do the Adele Haters. I quite like that.
And with no hesitation, Neil Coyle.
Neil Coyle, right. So Neil Coyle, the Adele Haters, and Banksy. That's a pretty good
that's a good top 3.
Final 3, isn't it? Now, we lately we haven't been doing the kind of get rid of one. We've just been sort of going straight for the number 1, really. So I don't know what you think. But I guess... I mean, I would go between one of yours, actually.
Yeah,
because I don't think Neil Coyle deserves to be number 1 plank. I think I'd be quite happy for him to be number 3.
We don't want to give him the satisfaction.
No,
exactly.
No, exactly right.
Do you think Banksy deserves it?
I think Banksy
for being a massive plank.
Just the comedic timing.
Planksy.
And maybe he should walk the Planksy, and he should walk the plank on his own boat.
That would be great.
Yeah,
that's fine. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Planksy.
Me too.
That's
Planksy.
fantastic.
That's brilliant. That's a hashtag.
Good.
That's a hashtag.
So
Banksy.
So the Adele Haters coming at number 2. Number 1, plank of the week, Banksy the Planksy. Well done. We'll see you next week. Russell, thank you very much indeed. Esther, thank you very much indeed. Don't forget, get yourself onto our YouTube channel and subscribe to it, and look out for all the great stuff that we're doing. And we'll see you next week.